On the 26th of December 1900, a supply ship approached a small cluster of islands off the western coast of Scotland. The crew had been trying to reach the islands for 11 days. Storms had kept them away. When the weather finally broke, they sailed toward the lighthouse on Flannan Isles, expecting to be greeted by the 3 keepers stationed there. Nobody came to meet them. The lighthouse light, which had been dark for 11 days, was dark still. When they climbed to the lighthouse door and pushed it open, they found something that made no sense at all. The table was set, the food was prepared, the chairs were in their places, and the 3 men who lived there were simply gone. Welcome back to Noxara, where the files that were never meant to surface finally do. This is file number 002, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse Vanishing, December 1900. And 120 years later, not a single credible explanation exists. The Flannan Isles are a remote group of small, uninhabited islands, sitting roughly 20 miles off the western coast of Scotland, far into the open Atlantic. They are bleak, windswept, and largely featureless, the kind of place that makes you understand why sailors feared the open sea. The lighthouse had only been operational since late 1899, barely a year old when the events of December 1900 unfolded. It was built by the Northern Lighthouse Board to guide ships through one of the most treacherous stretches of water in the British Isles. The rocks around Flannan had claimed dozens of vessels over the centuries. 3 men were assigned to keep the light burning. James Duckett, the principal keeper, was 43 years old, experienced, and by all accounts unshakable. He had worked lighthouse postings for years and was considered one of the most reliable keepers in the Northern Lighthouse Board service. Thomas Marshall was his first assistant, younger, quieter, described by colleagues as methodical and precise, and Donald MacArthur, the occasional keeper, a last-minute replacement for a man who had fallen ill just before the rotation. A replacement who was never supposed to be there. The 3 men arrived on the islands on the 7th of December, 1900. Their assignment was straightforward: maintain the light, keep the log, and wait for the supply ship that would arrive later that month. None of them would ever leave. When the relief keeper Joseph Moore first stepped inside the lighthouse on the 26th of December, he noted several things immediately. The kitchen table had been set for a meal. A chair had been knocked over or pushed back and left on the floor. The clock on the wall had stopped. The beds had been slept in. The oil lamps were filled and ready. Everything inside the lighthouse was in order. The kind of order that suggested the men had simply stepped outside for a moment. But they had not come back. Moore searched the island thoroughly. He found the gate to the western landing area open, which was unusual, as it was standard practice to keep it secured in rough weather. The iron railings near the cliff edge showed signs of damage. A large iron box used to store ropes and equipment had been moved from its mounting, something that would have required enormous force. The cliffs themselves told a different story. Rock had been displaced. Turf had been torn away from the slope leading down to the water. Something had struck that coastline with tremendous violence. But the most disturbing discovery was not outside. It was in the log. Thomas Marshall, the meticulous, precise first assistant who had maintained logs without interruption throughout his career, had written 3 entries in the final days before the disappearance. The entry for the 12th of December read, "Severe winds the likes of which I have never seen in 20 years." He noted that Ducat had been quiet all day, that MacArthur had been crying. The entry for the 13th described the storm continuing. Marshall wrote that all 3 men had prayed together for the first time. These were experienced men who had weathered Atlantic storms for decades, men who did not pray together. The final entry, dated the 15th of December, read simply, "Storm ended, sea calm, God is over all." There were no further entries, and here is what made investigators uneasy from the very beginning. Weather records from the surrounding area showed no significant storm between the 12th and the 15th of December. Whatever terrified those men, it was not on any official record. Over the past century, investigators, historians, and independent researchers have proposed several explanations. Each one answers part of the question. None of them answers all of it. The most widely accepted theory is a rogue wave, a sudden, massive wall of water striking the western cliffs without warning. The damage to the cliff face, the displaced iron box, the torn turf, all of it is consistent with an impact of that scale. The theory suggests that 2 of the men were working outside near the western landing when the wave struck. The third, perhaps hearing something or seeing the wave approach, ran from inside the lighthouse to help. All 3 were swept into the Atlantic. No bodies were ever recovered. The ocean kept them. This theory is logical. It is consistent with the physical evidence, and it explains almost nothing about the log entries. Because if a rogue wave killed them on or after the 15th of December, why were 3 experienced men, all of whom understood the danger of the western cliffs, outside near the water's edge during or immediately after a violent storm? Lighthouse protocol explicitly forbade it. These men had followed protocol their entire careers. Something convinced them to break the rules they had spent decades following, and we do not know what that was. A second theory focuses on the psychological state described in the log: the weeping, the silence, the collective prayer. Some researchers have proposed that the isolation of the Flannan Isles, 20 miles from the nearest inhabited land, surrounded by open Atlantic in December, triggered a form of acute psychological crisis, that the men became convinced something was coming for them, that the storm they described was not meteorological but psychological, that they walked into the sea themselves. But 3 men, simultaneously, none of whom had any prior history of mental illness, none of whom had shown any instability in years of service, all 3 on the same night, making the same decision. The mathematics of that coincidence are almost impossible. And then there is the detail that no official inquiry has ever satisfactorily addressed: the storm that was not there. Marshall described conditions so severe that seasoned lighthouse keepers, men who had survived the worst the Atlantic could offer, were left weeping and praying. And yet, the meteorological records for those days show nothing unusual: moderate winds, calm seas. Either Marshall fabricated 3 consecutive log entries, something with no precedent in his career, or what those men experienced in those final days was something the instruments of 1900 could not detect. Something that left no trace, except in the men themselves. The official inquiry, conducted by the Northern Lighthouse Board in early 1901, concluded that the 3 men had been killed by a rogue wave while working near the western landing. The case was closed. No further investigation was deemed necessary. The log entries were noted. The missing storm was noted. The broken protocol was noted. And then the file was sealed. James Duckett, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, the man who was never supposed to be there, have no graves. Their bodies were never recovered. The Atlantic gave nothing back. The lighthouse on Flannan Isles continued to operate for decades after their disappearance. It was automated in 1971, no longer requiring human keepers. As if the decision had been made quietly that it was better not to send people there anymore. What happened on Flannan Isles between the 12th and the 15th of December 1900, in the days when the log describes a storm that wasn't there, when experienced men wept and prayed and broke every protocol they had followed for their entire careers, nobody knows. And the most unsettling part is not the absence of an answer. It is the certainty that those 3 men knew exactly what was happening, and that whatever it was, they carried it with them into the sea. If this file disturbed you, good. That means you're paying attention. Subscribe to Noxara. Every Friday we open a new file. Some of them you'll wish we hadn't.